From the depths of time, a story emerges, fragmented and worn, yet still powerful enough to echo through the ages. On a clay tablet, ancient and cracked, the words tell of one who has seen the world as few have. He who has seen the history of Gilgamesh, it begins. He who knows all that has happened to him. He who has seen all kinds of wisdom and knows the mysteries, who has seen what is hidden and brings news from times older than the flood. This figure has traveled far, roads that stretch beyond the reach of ordinary men. Weary from his journey, burdened with the weight of what he has witnessed, he inscribes his knowledge upon a tablet. A record of wisdom, a testament of grief. And from those words, the walls of Uruk rise in our minds. Uruk Supuru, the strong-walled city, a symbol of civilization itself. But the tablet falters. The lines break, leaving only shadows of what once was. Yet the story pushes on, speaking of a charm, a chant or spell clinging to him unshaken, and then, as if the gods themselves intervened, the scene shifts. A god, distant and forsaken, watches as his cattle are lost to him. A man stands by the river, pushing his boat into the waters, covering it and weeping bitterly. Tears of sorrow, perhaps guilt. He returns, broken, to the city of Gangan-na. But Gangan-na is no longer the city he knew. It lies in ruins, utterly destroyed by the hand of an enemy. The city's gates are barred, the bolts firmly in place, yet inside, madness reigns. The she-asses trample their foals, the cows turn on their calves. Fear spreads like a shadow, and the people cower. The maidens sigh and wail like doves, their songs of despair echoing through the streets. Even the gods themselves are not spared the humiliation. The deities of Uruk, once mighty and revered, are reduced to insects and vermin. The gods take the forms of flies, buzzing aimlessly through the streets. The protecting spirits, once fierce and vigilant, scurry like mice, retreating into hidden holes. 3 long years pass as the enemy lays siege to Uruk. Hunger and despair grip the city. Even Ishtar, the powerful goddess of love and war, cannot overcome the invaders. Her divine strength falters, and she, too, is rendered powerless. But amidst the chaos, a voice rises. Bel, the Lord, speaks to Ishtar, his words lost to time, save for fragments that remain. And in those fragments we catch a glimpse of hope. A single line whispers of Babylon, the city of joy, suggesting that this story is not yet finished. And then the tablet breaks off, leaving us on the brink of revelation. The death of a king, an event that shook the people of Uruk, is hinted at, and from the ruins of Gangan-na, a name begins to rise. A savior, a leader, Gilgamesh. But how does he arrive in Uruk? And what role does he play in a city scarred by siege where gods and men alike have been brought low? The story, for now, is silent, but its echoes remain, waiting to be unearthed. Gilgamesh stood at the gates of Uruk surveying his city. Though the walls were mighty, the people beneath them trembled. His strength was unmatched and his will unbending, but the cries of his people reached even the heavens. Parents wept for their children pressed into his service, and warriors lamented their stolen brides. The gods listened to their cries. In the heavens they debated, and their voices carried to Aruru, the mother of creation. Aruru, they said, you formed Gilgamesh, a king unmatched in strength and cunning. Yet his heart is restless, and his people suffer. Fashion a rival for him, a force to temper his might and calm his storm. Aruru heard their plea. She washed her hands, took clay from the earth, and shaped it into the form of a man. From her divine hands Enkidu was born, wild as the mountains that cradled him. His body was covered with hair like thick grass. His locks flowed like the river reeds, and his strength rivaled the wild beasts. Enkidu roamed the wilderness, living as one with the gazelles, drinking from the streams alongside the cattle, and delighting in the freedom of the untamed world. Yet even as he thrived, his presence disrupted the balance of the land. The hunter, Sadu, saw him at the well, where Enkidu's might drove away the herds and ruined the hunter's traps. Sadu fled to Uruk, his heart heavy with fear. There, he sought an audience with Gilgamesh and described the wild man who thwarted him. "King of Uruk," Sadu pleaded, "this being is no ordinary man. His strength rivals the gods. He moves like the wind and lives among the beasts. I cannot best him." Gilgamesh listened, his eyes gleaming with interest. "If this Enkidu is as mighty as you claim, we shall bring him to Uruk, but not by force. Send the woman Shamhat. Her charms will tame him where weapons cannot." Sadu obeyed. With Shamhat at his side, he returned to the wilderness. For 3 days they waited at the well, where Enkidu drank and played among the animals. On the 4th day, Enkidu appeared, his body as untamed as the land itself. "There," Sadu whispered. "Now, Shamhat, reveal yourself." Shamhat stepped forward, casting aside her garments. Her beauty shone like the sun, and her presence stirred something within Enkidu that the wilderness could not provide. Enkidu approached her, drawn by desires he had never known. For 6 days and 7 nights they lay together, and Enkidu forgot the beasts of the field. When he rose, the gazelles turned from him and the cattle scattered. He sought to follow them, but his legs were heavy and his strength waned. He gazed back at Shamhat, who smiled and beckoned him forward. "You are no longer one with the wild," she said gently. "Come with me to Uruk, where men dwell. There you will find Gilgamesh, a man like you, but greater still. He waits for you." Enkidu listened. Her words kindled something new within him, a longing for purpose and companionship. He followed her to the city, leaving behind the only life he had ever known. As Enkidu approached Uruk, the people gathered, marveling at the man who looked like Gilgamesh but bore the roughness of the wild. Shamhat guided him to the city gates where Gilgamesh himself awaited. In the meantime, Gilgamesh had been troubled by dreams. He told his mother, Ninsun, of a meteor that fell from the heavens, too heavy to lift yet beloved by the people. He embraced it like a brother. Then came another dream of an axe that stirred the admiration of all. "These dreams speak of a companion," Ninsun said, "one who will stand beside you as an equal and a brother." When Gilgamesh saw Enkidu, he knew this was the man of his dreams, but there could be no friendship without a test of strength. Enkidu blocked Gilgamesh's path as he entered the plaza, challenging him. The two men grappled, their clash shaking the foundations of Uruk. Walls cracked and dust filled the air as they fought like bulls locked in a deadly contest. At last, Gilgamesh pinned Enkidu, his strength prevailing. Yet as he stood over his rival, he felt no triumph, only admiration. Enkidu, too, gazed at Gilgamesh with respect. In their struggle, they had found not an enemy but a kindred spirit. The two men stood in the ruins of their battle, their hearts lightened by a newfound bond. Though they had begun as adversaries, fate had forged them into brothers. Together they would embark on a journey that would echo through the ages. Enkidu, having listened to the words of Shamash, felt his anger diminish. He looked toward the path ahead and resolved to stand by Gilgamesh as a friend and ally. His wild heart, once tied to the wilderness, began to long for the city and the bond of brotherhood that awaited him there. Meanwhile, Gilgamesh also prepared himself for the journey ahead. The dream of the stars falling from heaven and the massive figure that descended had stirred him deeply. His mother, the wise Ninsun, interpreted the vision, telling him that a great companion would arrive, one who was his equal in strength, who would stand beside him in the trials to come. "This companion will not only test you," she said, "but he will also strengthen you. Together you will accomplish what no man can do alone." When Enkidu entered Uruk, the city marveled at his presence. Though shorter in stature than Gilgamesh, his form was mighty, his hair thick like a lion's mane, and his strength undeniable. The people whispered in awe, "Surely the gods have sent this man as a match for Gilgamesh." The meeting of the two heroes in the streets of Uruk was destined. As Gilgamesh approached the temple of Ishtar to claim his right as king, Enkidu blocked his path. The crowd fell silent, watching as the two giants confronted each other. "Who are you to bar my way?" demanded Gilgamesh. "And who are you to claim the right of all men?" replied Enkidu. They clashed like bulls in the plaza, their strength shaking the walls of Uruk. The battle raged, but neither could overpower the other. Finally, Gilgamesh, exhausted but exhilarated, laughed and extended his hand. "You are strong, Enkidu, and the gods have sent you to be my equal. Let us not fight, but join forces." Enkidu, recognizing the spirit of a true friend in Gilgamesh, clasped his hand and replied, "Together we will be stronger than any foe." Thus began their friendship, a bond forged in strength and respect. The people of Uruk cheered as the two heroes stood side by side, a testament to unity and power. As the days passed, Enkidu and Gilgamesh spoke of great deeds to achieve together. It was then that Gilgamesh revealed his desire to journey into the cedar forest and confront Humbaba, the monstrous guardian appointed by the god Enlil. Humbaba's reign over the forest had long been a source of fear, his name whispered in dread among men. "We must defeat him," said Gilgamesh. "The cedar forest is sacred, but its treasures should not belong to a tyrant who inspires only terror. If we succeed, our names will be immortalized." Enkidu, though hesitant, warned his friend. "Humbaba is no ordinary foe. His breath is fire, and his roar can shake the heavens. The gods themselves protect him." But Gilgamesh was undeterred. "With your strength beside mine and the favor of Shamash, no enemy can stand against us." Ninsun, hearing of their plan, sought the favor of Shamash for her son. She ascended to the temple, burned incense, and prayed. "O Shamash, protector of travelers, watch over Gilgamesh and Enkidu as they embark on this perilous journey. Let your light guide them through the shadow of the forest and grant them victory over Humbaba." Shamash, moved by her plea, promised to aid the heroes, gifting them with winds to counter Humbaba's fiery breath. Gilgamesh and Enkidu armed themselves for the journey. Mighty weapons were forged, axes that could fell the tallest cedar and swords that gleamed with the light of the sun. The people of Uruk bid them farewell, their hearts heavy with both fear and hope. Before departing, Enkidu shared his knowledge of the cedar forest, warning Gilgamesh of the dangers that lay ahead. "The forest is alive," he said. "It whispers and its shadows move. Humbaba is not just a guardian, he is the embodiment of the forest's wrath." But Gilgamesh, ever bold, smiled. "Then we shall be the storm that overcomes him." With Shamash's blessings and their weapons in hand, the two heroes set out toward the cedar forest, their hearts united in purpose. They marched into the unknown, ready to face Humbaba and etch their names into eternity. The preparations for the journey to the cedar forest were complete. The armies of Uruk had gathered, their armor gleaming in the sun. The people stood in reverent silence as Gilgamesh and Enkidu, the mighty companions, prepared to set out on their perilous quest. Though the path ahead was fraught with danger, their resolve was unshaken. Before departing, Gilgamesh turned his gaze to the heavens and spoke to Shamash, the sun god. Offering sacrifices of smoke and drink, he lifted his hands in prayer. "Shamash, you have stirred my heart to seek this challenge. Humbaba, the despot of the cedar forest, spreads terror across the land. Grant us your favor so that we may triumph over him. Shield us from the unknown evils of this journey and guide us safely back to our people." Enkidu, standing beside his friend, added his voice to the plea. "O mighty Shamash, we walk a path ordained by the gods. Humbaba's reign of terror must end. Watch over us as we venture into the sacred forest, and let our strength be as one." The queen of the gods, hearing their prayers, dispatched omens to reassure them. But even with divine favor, the weight of the task pressed heavily on their spirits. Gilgamesh dreamed ominous dreams, which he shared with Enkidu during their journey. The two heroes departed Uruk with purpose, moving steadily toward the cedar forest. Every 20 double leagues they stopped to eat, replenishing their strength. Every 30 double leagues they rested, gathering their courage for what lay ahead. As they approached the outskirts of the forest, they paused to offer further sacrifices. Gilgamesh dug a hole in the earth, poured out a sacred meal, and prayed once more to Shamash. O mountain, O Shamash, bring Enkidu a dream to guide us. Let the visions reveal the outcome of our struggle against Humbaba. That night they lay under the vast sky, the air heavy with the scent of cedar. Around midnight, Gilgamesh awoke, startled by a dream. He turned to Enkidu, his voice tense with unease. "My friend, did you call to me in my sleep? I had a dream so terrible it has left my heart trembling. Heaven thundered and the earth quaked, darkness fell upon the day and lightning split the sky. Fire raged, devouring everything until all that remained was ash and smoke. Then the light was quenched, leaving only silence." Enkidu, though troubled by the description, placed a reassuring hand on Gilgamesh's shoulder. "Dreams are the whispers of the gods, my friend. The destruction you saw may symbolize the end of Humbaba's reign. Lightning and fire are the weapons of Shamash, our ally. Perhaps this dream foretells our victory, though it may come at great cost." Though Gilgamesh found some comfort in Enkidu's words, he could not shake the feeling of foreboding that lingered in his heart. As dawn broke, the two heroes pressed onward. The cedar forest loomed before them, its towering trees shrouded in mist. The air was thick with an unnatural stillness, broken only by distant thunderous roars, the voice of Humbaba. The forest itself seemed alive, whispering warnings to the intruders. Each step brought with it a sense of dread, as though they were trespassing on sacred ground. Enkidu, who had once roamed the wilderness, felt the oppressive power of the place and spoke to Gilgamesh. "Bel, the great god, has made this forest a terror to mankind. Humbaba is not merely a guardian. He is the wrath of the forest incarnate. His roar is like a storm, his breath like fire. We must tread carefully, for this is no ordinary foe." But Gilgamesh, determined and unyielding, replied, "Fear has no place in our hearts. Humbaba may be a terror, but we are the chosen of the gods. Together, we will overcome him." As night fell once more, the two heroes prepared to rest. They knew the battle with Humbaba was imminent, and the weight of the encounter pressed heavily on them. That night, Gilgamesh dreamed again. He saw himself standing amidst the forest, a mighty figure before him. The ground shook with each step of the figure, and fire poured from its mouth. Yet just as the figure reached out to destroy him, a blinding light descended from the heavens, scattering the darkness and quenching the fire. Gilgamesh awoke, shaken but resolute. He recounted the dream to Enkidu, who interpreted it with care. "The fire is Humbaba's wrath, but the light is Shamash, our protector. The gods are with us, my friend. This dream is a sign that we will prevail." As the morning sun broke through the mist, Gilgamesh and Enkidu stood at the threshold of the cedar forest. The roars of Humbaba grew louder, and the ground trembled beneath their feet. They tightened their grips on their weapons, their eyes meeting in a moment of unspoken understanding. "Are you ready, my friend?" asked Gilgamesh. "Together," replied Enkidu. "We will face whatever comes." With that, they stepped into the heart of the forest, where Humbaba awaited, the air crackling with the promise of a battle that would shake the heavens and etch their names into eternity. Gilgamesh and Enkidu stood at the threshold of the sacred forest, awestruck by its grandeur. The towering cedars reached toward the heavens, their canopies interwoven to form a sanctuary of gods. The air was thick with the scent of resin and earth, and an eerie stillness pervaded the grove. As they ventured deeper, the paths beneath their feet were unnaturally smooth, as if laid by divine hands. The two heroes marveled at the intricate beauty of the forest, but their awe was tinged with unease. This was no ordinary place. It was the dwelling of Humbaba, the chosen guardian of the gods. Before them rose the cedar hill, a massive mound crowned with a single cedar tree of unparalleled splendor. Its trunk shimmered in the sunlight, and its shade fell like a benediction. Enkidu stopped to admire it, feeling the weight of the forest's sanctity in his heart. "This is the dwelling of the gods," Enkidu murmured, his voice reverent. "The air is heavy with their presence. Humbaba's power comes from this place, from these cedars. Gilgamesh, we must tread carefully." Gilgamesh, though in awe, was undeterred. The gods may dwell here, but so do we, the chosen of Shamash. Humbaba's terror ends today. Together we shall prove that no guardian, no matter how fearsome, can stand against our strength." The companions pressed on, their eyes scanning the forest for signs of Humbaba. Eventually they came upon a massive gate carved into the side of the hill. It was ancient and imposing, its surface etched with symbols of divine protection. The gate groaned under their combined might as they forced it open, the sound echoing through the forest like a warning cry. Beyond the gate, the forest thickened, its shadows deepening into an impenetrable gloom. The air grew heavier, suffused with a strange energy. Enkidu paused, his wild instincts alert. "He is near," he whispered. "I can feel his presence. The ground trembles with his breath." Gilgamesh nodded. "Let him come. We will face him together." As they waited, the two companions recounted their past glories, their voices steadying their nerves. Enkidu spoke of his transformation from a wild man to a warrior, his friendship with Gilgamesh, and the strength they had drawn from each other. "I was once a creature of the wild, unfit to walk among men," Enkidu said, his voice filled with gratitude. "But you, my brother, gave me purpose. Together we have achieved what no others could. This day will be no different." Gilgamesh smiled, his hand resting on the hilt of his weapon. "And I, a king burdened by the weight of the crown, found in you a true companion. You have reminded me of my strength, my courage. Humbaba will fall, and the gods themselves will marvel at our deeds." Their words filled the forest, rising like a song of defiance against the oppressive silence. It was a declaration not just to themselves, but to the gods and the guardian who awaited them. Suddenly, the stillness was broken by a roar that seemed to shake the very earth. The trees shuddered as a hot wind swept through the forest, carrying the stench of death and decay. The companions turned toward the source of the sound, weapons at the ready. From the shadows emerged Humbaba, his towering form a monstrous fusion of man and beast. His eyes burned with fury, and his breath, like a scalding wind, made the air around him shimmer. His voice was like the rumble of distant thunder as he spoke. "Who dares disturb my forest? Who dares defy the will of the gods?" Gilgamesh stepped forward, his voice strong and unyielding. "We are Gilgamesh and Enkidu, chosen by Shamash. Your reign of terror ends today. This forest belongs to the gods, not to your tyranny." Humbaba's laughter boomed through the trees. "Fools! You think your mortal strength can challenge me? I was placed here by the gods themselves. This forest is my domain, and I will devour you both as I have all others who dared to trespass." Humbaba's body seemed to radiate power, his presence overwhelming. But the companions stood firm, their courage bolstered by their bond and the blessings of Shamash. As Humbaba advanced, the forest itself seemed to respond. Branches twisted, the ground trembled, and the air grew thick with an unnatural energy. Gilgamesh raised his weapon, its edge gleaming in the dim light. "Come then, Humbaba. Let this be the day your terror ends." The battle was at hand, and the echoes of their clash would reverberate through eternity. After slaying Humbaba and returning victorious, Gilgamesh stood before the people of Uruk, his body marked with the signs of battle. He washed the blood from his weapons and polished his armor until it gleamed in the sunlight. Shedding his soiled garments, he donned fresh robes, adorned himself with ornaments, and placed the royal crown upon his head. In his triumph, the goddess Ishtar, radiant and resplendent, descended from the heavens to stand before him. Her voice, honeyed and seductive, reached out to him. "Come, Gilgamesh," Ishtar said, her eyes alight with desire. "Be my husband. Share your strength with me, and I will give you the treasures of heaven and earth. I will seat you in a golden chariot adorned with jewels, drawn by lions with manes like the sun. Kings and lords shall bow before you, and all the wealth of the world will be yours. Together, we will rule as no mortals ever have." But Gilgamesh, though honored by the goddess's attention, saw the danger in her offer. He met her gaze and spoke with unyielding resolve. Ishtar, your beauty is unmatched and your power is great, but I know the fate of those who have loved you. You bring ruin to all who give you their hearts. Where is Tammuz, your husband of youth? You caused him to weep for eternity. The alalu bird whose wings you crushed now cries in the forest. You have broken the lion, the horse, the shepherd, and the farmer. Each man you claimed has met with destruction. I will not be your next victim. Hearing his rejection, Ishtar's radiant face darkened with fury. She rose into the heavens, her cries echoing in anger. She approached her father Anu and her mother Antum and said, "Father, Gilgamesh has insulted me. He has rejected my love and hurled accusations at me. He must pay for this affront." Anu, though weary of his daughter's temper, sought to placate her. "What would you have us do, Ishtar?" "Create for me the bull of heaven," she demanded, "so I may unleash it upon Gilgamesh and his city. Let him know the price of mocking a goddess." Anu hesitated but relented, for he feared his daughter's wrath as much as her tears. The bull of heaven was created, a monstrous divine beast of immense power, and Ishtar unleashed it upon the earth. The bull of heaven stormed into Uruk, its roar shaking the walls and splitting the earth. Fields turned barren in its wake, rivers dried up, and the people cried out in terror. Gilgamesh and Enkidu, hearing of the destruction, took up their weapons and rushed to meet the beast. The battle was fierce. The bull's breath scorched the land and its hooves shattered stone. Enkidu seized it by the horns, wrestling it to the ground with all his might. Gilgamesh, with a roar of defiance, drove his sword deep into the bull's heart, ending its rampage. The people of Uruk erupted in celebration, their fear replaced by awe at the hero's courage. Watching from the walls of Uruk, Ishtar wept in fury and despair. Her piercing cries carried across the city, but Enkidu, unshaken, turned to her with disdain. He tore a piece from the bull's carcass, the right side, and hurled it at the goddess. "Take this, Ishtar," Enkidu shouted. "Let this be a sign of your defeat. Just as we have conquered this beast, we would conquer you if you dare face us." Ishtar retreated, humiliated, and gathered her followers, the sacred prostitutes and hierodols, to mourn the bull of heaven. But the city of Uruk celebrated Gilgamesh and Enkidu, their victory uniting the people in joy. The heroes marveled at the bull's immense size and beauty, its horns gilded and encrusted with precious stones. They removed the horns and dedicated them to their god, Lugalbanda, placing them in his shrine. Then, cleansing themselves in the Euphrates, they returned to Uruk, where Gilgamesh proclaimed their triumph. "Who is glorious among the heroes?" he asked. "Gilgamesh is glorious among the heroes," the people cried. "Who shines among the men?" "Gilgamesh shines among the men." That night, after feasting and celebrating their victory, the heroes rested in Gilgamesh's palace. But as Enkidu slept, a vision came to him, dark and foreboding. He woke with a start and turned to Gilgamesh. "My friend," Enkidu said, his voice heavy with dread, "the great gods have taken counsel against us. I fear that our deeds, though glorious, have angered them. There is more to come, and the price of our victories may yet be paid." Gilgamesh listened, his heart troubled by Enkidu's words, though he did not yet understand their meaning. The joy of their triumph lingered, but in its shadow loomed an unspoken fear. The will of the gods would not be defied so easily. The city of Uruk buzzed with the echoes of celebration. The people still marveled at the victory over the bull of heaven, their king Gilgamesh having once again proven his unmatched strength and valor. Yet, despite the feasts and the praise, a shadow had fallen over the heart of Enkidu. The day after the Jubilee, as the sun rose high, Enkidu awoke with a heavy heart. His dream of foreboding lingered in his mind, its dark omens refusing to let him forget the warning it carried. He turned to Gilgamesh, his voice hoarse with distress. "My friend," Enkidu began, his eyes clouded with unease, "the dream I had, it has come true. What I feared most is now upon us." Gilgamesh looked at him in concern. "What is it, my brother? You have always been strong, and your dreams have never been more than fleeting visions." But Enkidu's face was pale and his breath labored. The gods have turned their favor away from us. The victory we celebrated has angered them. I feel my body weakening. As the days passed, Enkidu's condition worsened. He could no longer rise from his bed. His strength, which had once been so great, now seemed to drain away with every passing hour. 12 days of suffering took their toll. On the first day, Enkidu's body grew feverish and his strength faltered. On the second day, he coughed violently, his limbs trembling. By the third and fourth days, his body was racked with pain. The once mighty warrior who had fought beside Gilgamesh now lay motionless, his strength slipping further from him. As the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th days dragged on, Enkidu grew weaker still. His spirit, too, seemed to diminish. On the 11th day, Enkidu was no longer able to move. His feverish body burned with the heat of death, and his breath came in shallow gasps. He could barely speak, but with a weak voice he called out to Gilgamesh. "Friend, Gilgamesh, I am leaving. The gods have decreed it. My time has come. I have fought my battles, and now I must face the final one, the one no warrior can win." Gilgamesh, who had been by his side through every trial, his heart heavy with grief, knelt by his friend's bed. He tried desperately to hold on to the fleeting moments they had left together, but the reality was unavoidable. Enkidu's body was succumbing to the sickness, his breath now shallow and ragged. Gilgamesh's heart broke as he looked upon his brother. He knew that Ishtar's wrath, the goddess whose anger had led to their confrontation with the bull of heaven, was now taking its toll. The gods had punished them for their defiance, and Enkidu, his dearest friend, was the one to pay the price. The 12th day dawned with silence. Enkidu's breath had stopped and his body lay still. Gilgamesh, unable to accept the loss, wept for his fallen companion. He cried out to the gods in anguish, asking why they had taken Enkidu from him. "I, Gilgamesh, who have defeated kings and gods alike, cannot defeat the will of fate. What is the point of my strength if in the end it cannot save my closest friend?" He spent the day in mourning, refusing to leave Enkidu's side. His sorrow was deep and his grief seemed endless. But the reality of Enkidu's death weighed heavily on him, and with it came a resolve he had not known before. Gilgamesh vowed that he would not let his friend's death be in vain. He would seek the gods, search for answers, and find a way to conquer even death itself, if it meant bringing Enkidu back to life. His heart, shattered by loss, now burned with an insatiable desire to defy the gods and achieve immortality. And so, with Enkidu's lifeless form by his side, Gilgamesh set out on a new quest, a journey to seek the secrets of eternal life. Gilgamesh's heart was consumed with grief and fear after the death of his beloved friend Enkidu. Unable to bear the weight of his sorrow, he wept bitterly, lying prostrate on the earth. His cries echoed through the streets of Uruk, and his anguish filled the land. "I will not die like Enkidu," Gilgamesh vowed through his tears, "but I cannot ignore the fear that has entered my heart. Death haunts me now, and I will not rest until I find a way to conquer it." His resolve grew stronger, and amidst his mourning a new purpose took root within him. He knew he could not face the inevitability of death as Enkidu had. He had to find a way to escape the fate that awaited all men. The answer, he believed, lay with his ancestor Utnapishtim, who had once been granted immortality by the gods. Determined to find Utnapishtim and learn the secret of eternal life, Gilgamesh set out on a perilous journey. His body and mind were heavy with the burden of grief, but his will was unshakable. His first obstacle lay in the form of the savage, untamed lions that roamed the wilderness. On the road, he encountered a pack of lions. His heart raced with fear and his eyes widened at the sight of their ferocity. But he remembered his purpose and lifted his gaze to the heavens. He called out to the god Sin for protection, offering a prayer from the depths of his soul. The god hearkened to his call and granted him the strength to face the beasts. In the dark of night, Gilgamesh found himself surrounded by the lions, but with his axe in hand he charged fearlessly. The battle was fierce, But Gilgamesh's resolve and strength proved greater than the lion's savagery. He struck them down one by one, scattering the creatures with his might, and continued on his journey undeterred. After several trials, Gilgamesh arrived at the foot of the great mountain Mashu, a formidable barrier that stood between him and Utnapishtim. The mountain, towering and steep, was guarded by fearsome creatures known as the Scorpion Men, who stood at the entrance like sentinels, their eyes glowing with an eerie, terrifying light. As Gilgamesh approached, he felt the terror rise within him. The Scorpion Men's appearance was monstrous, with their fierce expressions and glistening scales, and their presence sent waves of fear coursing through his veins. But Gilgamesh, resolute in his mission, did not turn away. One of the Scorpion Men looked upon him, sensing something divine within him. "He who stands before us is not mere mortal," the Scorpion Man said to his wife, his voice filled with awe. "Two-thirds of him is like a god, and only a third is man." The Scorpion Man turned to Gilgamesh, his demeanor changing from hostility to curiosity. "Why do you come here, brave one?" the Scorpion Man asked. Gilgamesh, steady despite the terror that had gripped him, replied, "I seek Utnapishtim, my ancestor. He was granted immortality, and I must learn from him how to defy death itself." The Scorpion Man listened, and after a moment of hesitation, he spoke again. "To reach Utnapishtim, you must pass through the mountains of Mashu, where the darkness is thick and impenetrable. 12 miles of darkness, endless and suffocating. No man has ever dared to traverse it." But Gilgamesh's determination was unwavering. "I will not be turned away. I will face whatever lies ahead." Seeing his resolve, the Scorpion Man reluctantly agreed. With a wave of his hand, he opened the gates of the mountain, allowing Gilgamesh to begin the difficult journey through the forbidding path. Gilgamesh took his first step into the mountain of Mashu. The darkness was suffocating, and the weight of it pressed down upon him. He walked for 1 mile, and the darkness remained thick, the air heavy with an unnatural weight. 2 miles passed, and still there was no sign of light, but Gilgamesh pressed on, his footsteps steady as he refused to turn back. As he walked deeper into the darkness, something miraculous happened. The path began to change. In the distance, he saw a faint glimmer of light. As he approached, he saw the source. Trees unlike any he had ever seen before, their branches bearing jewels and precious gems. The trees shone with an otherworldly radiance, their fruit dazzling in the faint light. The sight took his breath away, and for a moment he paused in awe. The branches of the trees were laden with diamonds, and crystal-like fruits hung from them, their brilliance illuminating the path before him. The beauty was beyond measure, a stark contrast to the suffocating darkness he had just crossed. These trees, their fruit, and the crystal-like branches were unlike anything Gilgamesh had ever encountered, and they gave him a renewed sense of strength and hope. He continued on, knowing that the end of his journey was drawing near. He was closer than ever to Utnapishtim, and with each step his determination to uncover the secret of immortality grew stronger. He would face the gods, he would face the darkness, and he would not stop until he had achieved what no man had ever achieved before: eternal life. Gilgamesh, weary from his long journey, found himself standing before a new and formidable obstacle, the Sea of Death. As he approached, he noticed a divine figure sitting upon a throne by the sea, a girl named Siduri, who, seeing the lone traveler, took counsel with herself in hesitation. The sight of Gilgamesh, clothed in animal skin and bearing the marks of hardship, caused her to shut the gates of her ocean palace, as though to protect herself from the stranger who approached. Gilgamesh, angered by her apparent dismissal, lifted his finger toward the gate and demanded, "Why do you close the gate against me? What harm can I do? I will break through your gate if you do not open it." Siduri, watching him from a distance, realized that this was no ordinary man. Her heart softened as she recognized the grief in his eyes, and so she opened her gate to speak with him. She asked him about his journey, and he responded, revealing the purpose behind his relentless pursuit. He sought to find Utnapishtim, his ancestor, who had been granted immortality by the gods. Siduri listened intently, and then spoke the truth with a voice tinged with sadness. Gilgamesh, the crossing of this sea is impossible. No man has ever crossed it. Only Shamash, the sun god, has the power to do so. The waters of death lie before you, and beyond them is the Isle of the Blessed. But how, Gilgamesh, will you cross such an impassable sea? Even if you succeed in crossing, what will you do once you reach its far shore? The path is fraught with danger, and the waters are closed to all but the gods. Gilgamesh, undeterred by Siduri's warning, pressed on, asking her for any possible solution. Siduri, pitying him but knowing the risks, offered one last piece of advice. There is a way, she said. If you seek Utnapishtim, you must first meet Urshanabi, the ferryman of Utnapishtim. He may help you cross the waters of death, but only if you prove yourself worthy. He lives by the forest, where the cedar trees grow. If you can find him, you may have a chance. Gilgamesh, determined to continue his quest, journeyed through the treacherous terrain until he came upon Urshanabi, the ferryman. At first, Urshanabi was alarmed by Gilgamesh's appearance, his body clad in the skin of beasts, his face marked with the grief of a man who had seen too much. But Gilgamesh, unrelenting, shared his purpose with Urshanabi, speaking of his desire to learn from Utnapishtim, to defy death, and to escape the fate that had claimed his friend Enkidu. Urshanabi, though initially skeptical, agreed to help Gilgamesh, but with a warning. Your hand, Gilgamesh, has already caused harm. You have smashed the stones which were necessary for the crossing. But I will help you. Take this axe and go into the woods. You must cut 120 oars, 5 gar long, to make the crossing. Only then can we journey together. Gilgamesh, with the weight of his grief still upon him, followed Urshanabi's instructions, felling the trees and preparing the oars. When he returned, the two of them embarked on a boat built for the perilous journey. As they sailed through the dark and dangerous waters, they were tossed and turned by the raging seas. Despite the dangers, Gilgamesh did not falter. Day after day, he labored at the oar, determined to reach the far shore. For 45 days, they battled the fierce waves, and through it all, Gilgamesh kept his focus, steering the boat with determination. His body grew weary and his hands blistered from the endless work, but his resolve remained unbroken. As they neared the shore, Gilgamesh felt a shift in the air, a sign that they were nearing the end of their journey. It was then that Utnapishtim, from a distance, gazed upon the approaching boat. As the vessel neared, Utnapishtim began to reflect on the stranger who was making his way toward him. Is that man not more than mortal? He wondered. He resembles me in every way. Could he be a god? The boat finally reached the shore, and Gilgamesh disembarked, filled with both exhaustion and anticipation. He approached Utnapishtim, his heart heavy with sorrow, and poured out his tale of woe. He spoke of his adventures with Enkidu, the panther he had slain, the great bull of heaven, the monstrous Humbaba of the cedar forest, and the many trials they had faced together. But in the end, his voice cracked with grief as he spoke of Enkidu's death. The friend I loved has turned to clay, Gilgamesh lamented. Enkidu, my friend, my brother. I cannot bear the thought of his loss. I wander the earth in search of an answer to the question of life and death. I crossed mountains, seas, and dangers, but all of it was in vain. I will not lie down and sink into the earth like Enkidu. I will find a way to defy death. Gilgamesh stood in awe before Utnapishtim, the immortal sage who had once walked among the gods. His gaze fixed on Utnapishtim, who appeared unchanged by time, as though he had not aged a day. The same was true of his nature, untouched by the ravages of mortality that still haunted Gilgamesh's heart. The king, plagued by the desire for immortality, sought answers, his voice trembling with the weight of his plea. "Tell me, Utnapishtim," Gilgamesh asked, "how did you come to live among the gods, untouched by death like them? How can I escape the fate of mortality that looms over me?" Utnapishtim's eyes grew distant, and his voice deepened as he began to recount the tale of the great flood. He spoke of the ancient city of Shuruppak, nestled by the Euphrates River, a place corrupted by the actions of mankind. The gods, in their wrath, decided to send a deluge to wipe out the city and all who dwelled there. Only a few gods, such as Ea, the wise lord, opposed the decision, and it was Ea who whispered a secret to Utnapishtim. "Build a ship," Ea had instructed, "and take with you the seeds of every living creature, for the gods will unleash their fury upon the earth. Only you, Utnapishtim, can survive this calamity." Utnapishtim obeyed, constructing a massive vessel, sealing it with pitch and filling it with his family, his kin, and a host of every animal. He watched the storm clouds gather, and as darkness descended, he entered the ship, closing the door behind him. For 6 days and nights the storm raged, a battle of gods against the earth, and the heavens themselves trembled in fear. The world was submerged in water, and all life was lost. On the 7th day, the storm ceased, and Utnapishtim, in the quiet aftermath, opened a window to find nothing but endless sea. He released birds, a dove, a swallow, and finally a raven, until the raven returned, signifying that the floodwaters had receded. Utnapishtim made offerings to the gods, who gathered like flies around the sacrifice. Ishtar wept for the destruction, but Bel, the god of destruction, was enraged, questioning who had survived the flood. Ea, ever the wise one, defended Utnapishtim, revealing that it was his cunning and wisdom that had spared the hero. Eventually, Bel relented, blessing Utnapishtim and his wife, declaring that they would live as gods far from mankind in the distant land where rivers meet. As Utnapishtim finished his tale, he turned to Gilgamesh and, with a knowing look, spoke again. "What then will you do, Gilgamesh? Which god will grant you the strength to achieve immortality? For even I, who survived the flood, have not escaped the god's ultimate decree. Now sleep." Gilgamesh sank into a deep slumber, exhausted by the weight of Utnapishtim's words. For 6 days and nights he lay unmoving, his body as still as the dead. When he awoke, he was transformed, his strength restored, but the burden of his quest had not lifted. Utnapishtim's wife, seeing the transformation, urged him to give Gilgamesh the secret to eternal life. With a heavy heart, Utnapishtim revealed a plant, a rare and mystical herb that could restore youth to the old. Gilgamesh, filled with hope, set out to find the plant, and after a long journey he retrieved it from the depths of the sea. But fate was cruel. As he journeyed back to Uruk, a serpent stole the plant from him, leaving Gilgamesh once again empty-handed. He wept, realizing that immortality, like all things, was beyond his grasp. With the plant gone, Gilgamesh and the ferryman Uruk continued their journey, weary but resolute. They arrived at the great city of Uruk, its walls towering high, and Gilgamesh, now wiser, gazed upon its foundations with a new understanding of life, mortality, and the inevitable passage of time. "Uruk," he said, "go upon the walls of Uruk. Walk its length and examine its stonework, for I have built a legacy not of immortality, but of enduring greatness." And so Gilgamesh, having sought immortality and found wisdom instead, returned home, his journey a testament to the fragility of life and the enduring power of legacy. In the aftermath of his arduous journey, Gilgamesh, king of Uruk, was left to mourn the loss of his beloved companion Enkidu. Despite the divine assistance he sought from numerous gods, including Ningul, Bel, and even the moon god Sin, Gilgamesh's pleas for his friend's revival went unanswered. In his grief, he sought the counsel of the gods, his heart heavy with sorrow over the untimely death of the one who had once shared in his adventures. Though Gilgamesh was relentless in his quest to understand death and its finality, it was ultimately Nergal, the god of the dead, who responded. He allowed the spirit of Enkidu to rise like a wind from the underworld, granting Gilgamesh a rare, fleeting moment to speak to his fallen friend. Enkidu, however, was reluctant to describe the netherworld to Gilgamesh, knowing that the true nature of death was beyond the living's understanding. Nevertheless, Gilgamesh, in his unyielding grief, insisted upon learning the horrors of the realm beyond. Enkidu finally spoke, warning Gilgamesh of the desolation that awaited the dead, a place where the joy of life is swallowed by darkness, and where the souls of the forgotten wander in a ceaseless, grim existence. He spoke of the sad fate of those whose bodies are left unburied, their spirits forever restless, consumed by hunger and thirst. The lesson was clear. The dead must be honored with proper burial rites, for those who are forgotten in death live on only in suffering. In the final days of their conversation, Enkidu's words transformed Gilgamesh's understanding of life, death, and what it means to be remembered. The hero, once driven by pride and an endless thirst for glory, now realized that the ultimate honor lies not in immortal fame, but in the care and respect given to the dead. Thus, he learned the importance of mourning, ritual, and ensuring that the legacy of the deceased lives on through respect and remembrance. Enkidu's haunting description of the underworld, a place where even kings, priests, and rulers were reduced to mere shadows of their former selves, filled Gilgamesh with a deep sense of humility. He understood that the journey of life is fleeting, and that in the end it is not the grand deeds or great battles that matter most, but the dignity with which one faces death. Gilgamesh returned to Uruk, a changed man, carrying with him the invaluable lesson that true immortality is found in the legacy we leave behind, not in the quest for eternal life. The Epic of Gilgamesh, in its conclusion, leaves us with a poignant reflection on the transient nature of life and the importance of embracing mortality. It teaches us that while death is inevitable, how we live and how we honor those who came before us can offer a form of immortality far greater than any physical legacy.